Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome cinematographer Federico Cesca, who joins us to talk about their work on season 4 of Industry. Federico will talk us through the continuation of the show's visual style in the latest season. Please be warned that there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Federico. Hi, Fede. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Rob. Pleasure. Very nice to be here.
We're here to talk about the latest series of Industry that's come out recently, season 4. Before we jump into the project, how have you found the reception to the latest season?
Well, look, I think it's been pretty well received. I think that we left the bar pretty high after season 3, which was a really, successful season, I think. And season 4, we went into it thinking how do we improve on that? And yeah, I think we took a big swing, and I think it's been well received. So I'm very happy about it.
Yeah, and they've commissioned another series, so season 5, I think it's going to be the last one,
That's right.
which shows how much like the strength of season 4 and how quickly they were to commission it, especially in this day and age where sometimes the season doesn't come out for like 2-3 years. And like I can imagine, like as creatives, could be kind of frustrating. So all that momentum that you created previously kind of slows down a bit whilst you're trying to sort of catch back up to getting up to that high level.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's quite great that the guys could get this final season, kind of like greenlit right away. I mean, I remember like talking to them like a few years ago. I think probably after I shot season 2, and they told me that their dream was to do 5 seasons. So hey, dreams do come true if you work hard, and you're lucky, I guess.
Yeah,
You
and
know.
but then because you've been on that from season 2 to 4, what is that like to experience seeing the show grow, become bigger and bigger? Because again, like, and I don't want to say like make it sound like I'm an old man yelling at a cloud, but like in this day and age, it feels like a lot of high-end TV is big from the onset. With Industry, it's grown every season, and you felt that it's getting bigger, but it feels very organic in its growth.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think. Look, I think Industry is a really, really interesting series because I think if you compare it with other shows, like other, say HBO shows, I think it's quite small in scale, in budget, and I'm still, amazed by the fact that Mickey and Conrad, just they just were able to get it going to begin with. It's kind of like a miracle. And of course, I'm very grateful, that I've been able to take part in this adventure. But yeah, like you say, from season 2 and then to season 3 and 4, the show has grown. But from the inside, I would say that the growth is not so much in terms of, oh, here you go, you have more money now and more time. No, I can tell you like that. I don't think that's the case. If there's any extra money, it's marginal. You know what I mean? I think that the real growth of the show came from the fact that Mickey and Conrad are very, very curious writers, and they have a very, very, they're very, very aware of the times we live in, and they're always daring, to like kind of like push the envelope with what they write. And I would say when I first came in on season 2, the show was kind of finding its sort of style still, because after season 1 it wasn't quite gelled in a way. And I remember when I first met with them, they talked about, yeah, high energy and high pace and intensity and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, well, look, that sounds great. And like, I did my first episodes with a director called Isabella Eklov. She's great director. And when we were prepping, we were like, okay, so we're gonna go gonna go mostly handheld. It's gonna be we want to shoot like wide angles, kind of like just kind of like open up the world a little bit more. And I remember that Mickey and Conrad, they immediately responded very positively to what we were doing, which was kind of different from what the guys doing episodes 1 and 2 were doing. We came in. I did episodes 3 and 4 in that season, and we kind of felt like we need to kick the board a little bit and kind of like spice things up a little bit, and it kind of paid off, because I feel like by the end of that season is when industry kind of found its current visual style in a way. And I'm not saying one thing is better than other, but that's sort of like what it was kind of like gearing up towards, and yeah, it was very, very explorative, very, trial and error. And yeah, like you said, very organic, very organic.
I think as well,
Yeah.
like with the show, because maybe your trial and error can like also be shown on this on the show as well, because I know people working with markets and trying to do a shorts or try to make as much money as possible, but for them it's like a trial and error as well, because certain things that will happen and they can't control, and they kind of just have to figure it out whilst you guys are doing that as well. And especially with like the handheld side of things, because you basically kind of change your style to being more of a fly on the wall and being right in like the face of the actors, and you kind of see like this is again to come in the edit as well. It's like how much reaction shots are so important in the show, and just how people are sort of reacting to things if they don't know what's going on, or if they do know, they kind of have to have that poker face, because if you kind of give away your game, then that's it, you're done.
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple of things, in terms of, kind of like making mistakes, and kind of like from those mistakes, finding, oh, actually, this is not going to work, and we should try this instead, or whatever. Like finding what is the best approach. I honestly think that's a great way to do it. I rather do that than kind of like saying, hey, this is what I want to do. Sort of like, kind of like have my formula, and okay, I'm gonna apply my formula because I know this works, and like, so take it or leave it. And I don't think that's like really rewarding. It's not, doesn't feel creative to me. So, and I would say that, in the case of industry with Mickey and Conrad, like they're young, and they were, when they got industry, going, they were quite inexperienced. And so I think that the first couple of seasons were really for them to get a hang of things, like kind of like, okay, what does it mean to show run? What does it mean to like, you write these 8 episodes, and you need to make sure that there's a kind of cohesion, not just to what the story is, but like this world that you're creating, like the car, you know what I mean? And so I think that there was a lot of exploring from their part, which, again, I think what's brilliant about it is that because they came without a lot of, let's say, technical knowledge, they didn't go to film school, you know what I mean? So they kind of, they knew what they liked. The guys are incredibly knowledgeable, like they love, movies and TV, and stuff like that. So they have a really good vocabulary in terms of like, oh, what these guys do, or whatever, like let's try to do something like that. But they're not formulaic. And I think in that sense, the idea of, when I started working with them, as their DOP, like when they're starting that, when they were directing themselves, that was at the end of season 3. We didn't really have any preparation whatsoever. I was shooting episodes 5 and 6, and then 7 and 8, which is the episodes that they did, came right after. So I couldn't really prep with them. But I said to them, guys, we don't need to prep. I know the show, like really well. You are the creators, so you know it even better. And you will just kind of, we'll just feel things, and kind of like be very organic about it. So the truth is, like, the way we work is very, I wouldn't say it's a fly on the wall, but a typical day on industry is a little bit like, we show up in the morning, the guys have the floor, so we bring the actors, and I'm there with them, and we kind of, run the lines a couple times, and then we go for like a little bit of a block, like, okay, so you come from there, you sit here, And we'll see how we feel about it. If there's anything that, oh, can we give it a little bit more movement, or do we play it all sitting down, etc. Those kind of things. And then I come to them and I'm like, okay, well, guys, I think we should do it this way or that way, or maybe they will have an idea. And it's very in that sense, it's very, I'm not going to say improvised, because it's not improvised. It's just like, I think the kind of songs so well at this point that you don't have to kind of practice them so much before you perform. You know what I mean? Like, it's
You're all in
it's
sync.
very sort of, yeah, exactly. I think at this point, like, we're all very much in sync, and we just want to be there in the moment. You know what I mean? And react to each other, react to what the light is doing, react to what the actors are giving, react to what maybe Mickey and Conrad, or maybe they'll come and say, hey, why don't we look that way instead, or why don't we take it out of this room and shoot it in this other room? And I'll be like, yeah, sure, let's do that. Why not? I mean, if it's possible, I'll always say, like, yeah, why not? And so in that sense, yeah, it's incredibly fun. It's incredibly fast paced. And yeah, I mean, as a cinematographer, I love it because I get to operate 99% of the time. And then, yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that show has taught me a lot about the right amount of pressures in terms of lighting. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I've lit all this space and I know that the guys are gonna move from here to there roughly. And I've learned to sort of like to live with a little bit of an imperfect lighting, if that makes sense. I'm not really, it's not the kind of show where I'm allowed to, bring in a lot of diffusion and flags and stuff, like, I can't really. It's like, because we kind of like say, let's prioritize the freedom of the actors to basically own the set, like 360 degrees, and just play along like that. So in that sense, it's kind of, fly on the wall documentary style, kind of like you are there, but you're not there. You know what I mean? And yeah, I mean, look, I wish I could shoot this in the way the Dardenne brothers shoot their stuff, which is like they they rehearse it like so much. I don't know if you know their work, but like, like, they're these Belgian brothers who are incredible directors and writers. They won the Ballon d'Or twice, and their work is, for me, very, very, very inspiring, because you watch it and you're like, some of the most beautiful handheld work you've ever seen. It's like a dance, like a ballet, and it feels very organic, but it's very, very, very rehearsed. I mean, I remember reading, I think that they basically move in with their cast, and basically, like, they spend like a month or so just kind of like going over everything and like rehearse it to the exhaustion. But then they would also like do this thing where, like, they would tell the operator, but don't anticipate things. You know what I mean? Like, kind of, that the character is gonna get up at this point, but you have to pretend that you don't know. You know what I mean? So it's almost like you have to build in a certain level of, um, not imperfection, but you don't want it to be like too choreographed, or you don't
Yeah.
want it to be perceived as too choreographed. So look, industry, in an ideal world, we would work like that. Like, kind of, you would have time to really craft it. But the truth is that, no, that's a luxury that we don't have. Anyway, that was a rant, very long rant.
No, it's interesting because there's a lot to sort of take from the answer. I'll just go to about the Dardenne brothers. I guess if you don't get along in those first few months of rehearsals, then you're sort of stuck with one another until you start shooting. So that must, you could probably rip your hair out regarding that. But I understand what you mean, the point about that. Like, you would tell your camera operator, like, this is going to happen, but it could happen. Don't make it too, not static, but like robotic in your movement. Concentrate, be in
Right,
the
right.
rather be in the moment, rather than think of like they're going to stand up, so then you have to stand up as well. It's like, actually, maybe let the camera flow, like, from one side to the other, following them, rather than getting up with them. Something that's just
No,
like an
exactly.
example.
Exactly. It's sort of like it's like not preempting certain things, like for example, like if you're doing a scene between a couple characters and I'm like kind of like panning from one to the other, um, we'll usually do a few different takes, different versions. We'll do a version where I'm anticipating and I'm trying to catch the lines. I'll go from one character to the other and try to get all the dialogue, which is very kind of complicated when you're kind of like panning from one to the other. But then I'll do a version of that where rather than doing that, I'll just pretend I don't know who's saying what at what point. I don't know the script, and so I'll just react. I'll be like, oh, I hear somebody, and I go. Or sometimes I'll be like, I don't. I'm more interested in like this guy's reaction. So I think that from a sort of like camera audience point of view, uh, I kind of always feel like it's a little bit like if you're an actor and you prepare, and then you're kind of like overthinking it in the moment, and it feels too prepared, too mechanic, too robotic. It's like if I see you acting, then it's boring. You know what I mean? Like the idea is that you are not acting, you are reacting. You are literally like it's like you don't know what's coming to you, so you know what I mean. So you're waiting, and then you push back, and I think it's a little bit like that, the way I like to approach the way we shoot the show. At least that was that was the approach, in the earlier episodes I shot, and it has evolved. I mean, I'm sure you can tell that by the end of season 3 and season 4, the sort of canvas of what we do visually, it's expanded somehow.
I think so. So with the when you're talking about that as well, when you're operating and looking at like scenes, I think you react to the energy that the performers are giving as well. Because maybe one take they're a little bit calmer, but the next take they ramp up by 10-20%. So then you kind of have to follow that, and maybe you hold on them a little bit longer before you whip pan to somebody else, because there's so much that somebody can say with just a stare or the look of their eyes, or even the situation that's happening, especially in industry where they're talking about potential billion-dollar deals, where you think like, the only way that I can comprehend that is the how many zeros there is, if you write it down. But this is sort of like air quotes everybody's everyday life and what they're dealing with, especially with finance. I think when you talk about the style evolving, I think that comes from also how the show expands in terms of locations, and how in season 4 we've moved away from the trading room floor. So now it's just a trading room hotel suite, and then also you have boardrooms, and then there's more sort of more affluent locations as well. As a DOP, how does it feel to move away from the trading room floor, knowing that that you're not going to be sort of shackled to that point, but now you're going to be in a bigger, more open world, spanning over and different continents as well?
I mean, I think that getting away from Pierpoint, at the end of season 3, for me was kind of liberating, because I felt like I've shot that so many ways and so many times that I was like, let's just do something different, right? Um, but but to be honest, I would say that rather than the locations themselves and the world, okay, we go and shoot in sailboat in Mallorca, or then we go to shoot something in Berlin, or we go and shoot something in whatever, Paris. We didn't go to Paris, but like the story goes to Paris. And I mean, sure, that expands the world, but I think that what really allowed us to 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 kind of like expand the vocabulary of the show was more like a tonal shift in the way the guys were writing. Originally the show was really all about like these sort of like young brokers, and kind of like how hard it is, the work they do when they're like basically interns and trainees and whatever. And then they move along and they get higher. They kind of like learn to play the game. They become more cunning. They're like, and then like it's almost like the show then expanded in terms of Now the show is a little bit more of a psychological, and there's like a lot more of a like a thriller type of element, like in season, I remember like in season 3, it kind of got started with, remember like that at the beginning of that season, Yasmin, there's some paparazzis that are kind of like stalking her,
Yeah,
and she
they were
has
in
this
the
sense of
skip or something.
paranoia. Right. And that whole story, kind of like of her feeling paranoid and sort of like observed, made us think, well, maybe the show could be a little bit more voyeuristic, and maybe we could like start introducing long lenses, shooting through windows, more like spy, shoot from far, zooms, stuff like that. And like, I mean, if I'm going handheld and I say like an 18 millimeter, on the shoulder, that's fine. But if I need to put 180 or something on the shoulder, that's going to be very, very, very hard to operate. So then obviously what happened is that we naturally started putting the camera, we put the camera on a tripod, on a dolly or whatever. And so the tools kind of like started mutating a little bit. Of course, like they were a reaction to what the story was asking for, and and by the time we got to season 4, we are, like the guys were looking at movies from the 70s, like All the President's Men, or I don't know, just a lot of like old movies that, like, with all like a lot of like zooms and contra zooms and stuff like that, and so yeah, that kind of like was great because it meant like not repeating yourself so much, and being able to try new things. Like the opening of season 4, it's completely different to everything we've done before. Like opening on a sort of like a zooming out, from Diker. It's like new character. Who's this guy? What's he up to? One shot of him coming out of his apartment, and then him stalking Kiernan's character. Outside of her work, and then at the pub. And again, it's all done and shot in a very different way. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but that whole first sequence, it's all fairly stylized in a way that we've never really done so much before. There were signs of these that we were kind of evolving in a way. For example, season 3, there's the episode where Robert has his sort of like ayahuasca trip, and we went again. We were like, oh, look, the show is always handheld. If he's going like, he's having hallucinations and stuff like that, let's break the style and go full on like whatever, dollies, tripod, zoom, whatever. And again, it's like a matter of helping create a sense of highs and lows and rhythms, and breaking those rhythms. I'm not just talking about the editing, but the visual kind of rhythm of like the difference of a static shot versus, something that is moving and breathing, if that makes sense.
Yes, and like I think it's an interesting point as well when you're saying how you kind of change the zoom lenses and looking at other films to create a more of that sort of paranoia feel. You say, or the President's Men. I can imagine something like The Conversation probably played a part in it as well, and maybe something like Clute and Parallax View as well, in the way that they sort of show like the emptiness of like what people are doing in a way. And it's interesting to hear as well, like because in a way we're sort of used to seeing a certain way. It's the sort of visual style of it. But then once you have those changes, once you start mentioning it, in my mind I was thinking, oh yeah, like that is it's quite clever. But then also you didn't lose that sort of overall feel of the show. So it didn't feel like it was something completely different. It was more just instead of maybe handheld, we're just going to use a sort of longer lens and show off a little bit more of like, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to make it look like.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that the truth really is that that Mickey, Conrad, and I, we are very we we have a very eclectic, and the variety of stuff we like is big, right? So one of us can can come and say like, oh, I was watching Heat, Michael Mann the other day, and like there's that scene, yeah, and then we'll do little things where like, oh my god, this is like, okay, here we can play a little bit like that and kind of like cross the line the way Michael Mann crosses the line when he's like shooting, even dialogue scenes, or just certain little framing things, for example. And this again, like, and they're not like, it's not something that we plan, it kind of happens, and we both, and we all go like, oh, that was from Heat, right? so so for example, like when we did the scene with Harper and Eric, when he comes to see her in her apartment, and they're in the kitchen, and Harper is sitting by the counter. I mean, she's standing by the counter, and Eric is by the window, and there's this shot where Eric is facing out, and the curtains are moving a little bit, and the way he's standing, and I was like, well, this has these echoes of Heat, of those moments where Robert De Niro's character is like in front of the window, in his house that overlooks the ocean. Little things like that, there are things that are a little bit more obvious. Like for example, when Henry and Whitney go to New York, and they take Whitney down to that basement to the parking, and they put him in the car, and we went full on kind of like cyan green, kind of like with the fluorescent lights and stuff like that, and that was like a nod to All the President's Men, and the way they I mean, again, that it's very hard to get that, to look exactly like that, because film and the way those fluorescents were actually green like that in the day, it's very, I mean, now it's like they're not so ugly, they're actually too pretty. So that's another thing that we do a lot on industry, is how can we make it, how can we make it dirtier, how can we mess it up a little bit, things otherwise feel a little bit too clinical, you know what I mean? So there's always a kind of like a search for kind of complex skin tones and environments, and mixing lights of, like, natural light, and warm and cool, and just, yeah, kind of like trying to make it somewhat analog feeling, I think we all very much respond to that sort of like analog warmth, and texture in the image. Another massive reference for the guys is the work of the Safdie brothers, like Uncut Gems,
Good time.
and the Good Time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember. I think when we did first season with them, they were talking about Good Time. By the time we got to season 3, it was Uncut Gems. I'm sure, like season 5, they're gonna be talking about Marty Supreme. But no, that's fun. I mean, look, it's so interesting. Like, things like what was the name of the movie with the Brady Corbet movie,
Brutalist.
the Brutalist. So the Brutalist came up a couple times, and of course, there's a couple moments where, like, that's a little bit brutalisty, like the tilt up from the road up to the countryside, when at the end of episode 2, I think, when Henry and Yasmin are driving away. I mean, obviously, we know this. We know we're kind of like referencing these things, but you know what I mean? But it's like a little bit of oh, we love that stuff. Let's, great. Let's, this guy did it. These guys did it so well. So let's use that. So yeah, it's there. Yeah, there's so many references, in there.
I think as well, like when you have those references as like creatives and whatnot, you're, and I know that there's sometimes people like, oh, you might be copying it or it might be looking like a certain way, but I think at the same time, there's something that sparks in your mind that you didn't think of before, how you're going to shoot
Hmm.
a scene or how the scene could look. Because if it's two people talking in the suite, for example, like visually, you need to make it interesting, even though the dialogue is interesting. What they're talking about, it's like, what's the energy that we can provide? Then also, like, what's the subtext that we can also put into it, and like, what can we tell? What can the audience tell from it without being told what somebody's thinking as well?
Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. It's yeah, I mean, look, it's you always want to somehow be truthful, if that makes sense. I mean, I don't like when things feel forced when you're kind of like trying too hard to do something, if that makes sense. And you know it, you kind of feel like, we're trying too hard here, I think. So that's why I think that our approach in terms of like, you show up in the morning and you kind of like block the scene with the actors, and then you kind of like you plug yourself into that. We rarely come and say, this is what we're doing. We're gonna put the camera here, and you guys are gonna move from here to. We don't really dictate things like that. It's more the other way around. It's like, I would say 90% of the time, the blocking of the action and the actors dictate what the camera wants to do, and it's not really the other way around. Of course, there are exceptions to that, which is when you start, putting the camera on a dolly and zooming and stuff like that. Then the camera becomes, in a way, a little bit more authoritarian, if that makes sense. It's like, well, like I'm not gonna go in there, and I'm gonna zoom in whenever I want, and you know what I mean? And like, it's yeah, I don't know. It's very, very interesting, to be honest. Like the process of figuring it out. Like, how are we gonna play this thing? How are we gonna do it? And ultimately, I think that you have to keep in mind that this is a TV series, and that the rhythms of television are very different from like a feature film, for example. And so a lot of the time, we just have to give give the editor, like, the guys need options. They need to shoot just different elements in order to cut it. If it's too long, if it's sometimes whole chunks of scenes and dialogue gets cut because they realize they don't need it. It drags, just whatever. Like, there's always reasons, to do that. But then again, like, there are scenes like there's one in particular that it comes to mind right now, which is Henry and Yasmin in the room. Like, when they have this big argument. I think that's episode 2 as well. And it's a pretty long scene, right? When she comes back to the room, and he hasn't dressed, and he's I think he's been doing some drugs, and she confronts him, and it's, again, pretty long scene with lots of movement and stuff. And the guys say to me, like, why don't we do this as a oneer? But they told me, like, on the day. This was like a decision that we made on the day. And so I think the way it worked was like we basically blocked it before lunch break, and then we decided we're gonna shoot it as a oneer. And I said, like, great. I mean, look, I don't mind. I think it's gonna be awesome. But there were mirrors and stuff like that we had to work around. And then again, it's like, okay, if I'm gonna be shooting this as a oneer and I'm gonna be moving around, circling them and stuff like that, like lighting it, again, I can light from the top, I can, use practicals, etc. But it's different, you know what I mean? It's like, you make these decisions that have this sort of like domino effect. And then, of course, I mean, the biggest effect that this has is that suddenly you have this, whatever, 4 or 5 minute sequence where there are no cuts. And it's all about this banter between them, when she kind of like threatens, like she's going to slap him. And it's a beautiful scene. And I mean, having done that scene like that, I'm like, well, I mean, I'm very glad that we did it like that. I cannot imagine shooting it, well, we'll shoot him, we'll shoot her, and they'll just cut it together. Obviously, no problem. But again, that was, it wasn't like kind of like, oh, no, that scene. No, it was kind of like on the day. We're like, how can we, what can we do to make it special, to make it, I don't know. And this came from them, it was their suggestion. And I'm, I'm always happy to happy to oblige if I can. But that's very much industry in a nutshell, like, in terms of how we work with that's my experience with them. It's not necessarily like the experience that other DOP or the different blogs might have worked differently, but with them, them being the showrunners and the writers, I think that gives them a certain agency. And the fact that I've also like shot so many episodes and I know them and I know the show so well, that I think we feel very, very comfortable kind of letting it unfold in a way that for us feels real and again organic, and that we can react to things, rather than impose too much.
Yeah, and I think as well as you said, like some of these ideas having on a day, I can imagine there's probably a split second of being like, it's going to be very difficult, but we could do it because it's, you know, in your mind, you might have something that you might want to do, but then if they want to change something to something a little bit more technical and complicated, then you, you will need an extra 5 minutes to walk around the set and be like, okay, this is going to be a one. Oh, we've got these mirrors here. We need to make sure that we get props on board to have a look and be able to take these mirrors out because I don't want to move them just in case if they're set to dress or a part of the location, who knows? But it's
Yeah,
also,
yeah. I mean, look, but the biggest thing with that one was the biggest challenge. It was okay. We did it in one, and of course, I caught myself in the reflection a couple times. The boom was in the reflection a couple times. So then it became this thing where like, well, if you guys really want to keep it as a oneer and use it as a oneer, you're gonna have to clean that mirror, which they did. And but again, that's like, I mean, I think many times, not only on industry, on other shows as well. I've done some beautiful oneers and things like shots that are really they tell the story and they don't need to be cut at all, and they cut them, and that's kind of like I mean, you're kind of a little bit powerless in that sense. You've done 17 takes to get this right, but then you're gonna do it a little bit as a reverse of that, just to and you hope that hey, like they're gonna keep it, but you know what I mean? I would say that's one of the most painful things that you have to live with as a DP. It's like once you kind of like give birth to this thing, it's sort of like it's not yours anymore. It goes out there and has its own will in a way. And I've been in situations shooting Top Boy, for example, where we did this great oneer, and then they wanted some insert of a phone or something, and one of the actors said like, if you shoot it, they'll use it. And we had to shoot it because it was kind of like, you have to shoot it, like whatever the powers ask you to shoot it, and you shoot it, and then they use it, of course.
I think
um
that maybe selfishly, if they don't use it in the end, then you're just like, yes, we kind of won in the end.
but it's interesting because I would argue that it's not about a shot. It's not about like, oh, but it was my shot and they broke it. It's not that. It's the fact that I do believe in kind of like telling the story kind of in a sort of like minimal way, if that makes sense. And when I say minimal, it's like, don't overdo it. If you don't have to cut so much, like in terms of like spoon feeding the audience, you know what I mean? And sometimes the audience doesn't need to know who's calling, because the guy's gonna I'm gonna pick up the phone and I'm gonna say like, oh hey, how are you doing, Harry? So I don't need to see who's calling, like his reaction or whatever, and then him picking up tells me everything I need to know, and things like that. Where for me it's more, I would say, the pain and the frustration comes from the fact that sometimes you feel like things become dumb. Like that they're edited in a way to kind of, the compromises are, they're not aesthetic. They're like, well, they are aesthetic, but not in a sort of like superficial way. They're holistically wrong. They're making things more pre-digested, if that makes sense. And I don't like that, man. I'm like, I want the audience to work a little bit more, if that makes sense. To have to be a little bit more present, be a little bit more aware of things, rather than saying the same thing 4 times just in case they didn't get it the first three.
Yeah, you want to like respect the audience a bit more to allow them to what, as you said, you don't need to repeat it 4 times. They can sort
Yeah.
of catch on. And it's the same with, I think if you're like in episode 5, for example, these characters have been introduced, so you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
already in that sort of flow of it all.
100%. And I have to say that I think industry has been good at that. I think industry is a show that plays at a pace that is very fast, and if you blink, you are gonna miss out on something. And like, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't think it spoon feeds so much. I think it's quite lean. The fact is that I think a lot of things get cut. Like, we shoot a lot of things that don't make the cuts, because the guys realize, oh, we don't need to explain this again here, or we don't need to show this, or you know what I mean. And they're like, I think they trust the audience Like they think, hey, the people watching this, they're not idiots. They know, they'll get it. And that for me, it's essential. I don't want to be shooting stuff uh for I want to kind of like level up and not down in that sense. you know Still, of course, look, you always have to be aware that you're doing something that is supposed to, whatever, be entertaining. You're not doing, it's not Bellatar, it's not Tarkovsky. It's an episodic show that, you can eat popcorn and watch it and have a laugh. But that being said, hey, you can do it one way or another way. I'm always gonna go like, let's try to be,
Push the
uh
boundaries.
yeah, yeah. But not again, not pushing the boundaries sort of like aesthetically or formally. I don't really care about that. It's kind of like just push the boundaries in terms of like, if everybody tells you like this is like too weird or too complicated or the audience are not going to get it, I'm like, I think you're wrong. I think that the audience, I mean, it's like the subtexts and all that stuff, it's all there. And if you highlight it too much, it's no longer a subtext, it becomes text, it becomes obvious. You know what I mean? It's like when music gets used in a sort of like very obvious way to signal, hey, something bad's gonna happen here, or they want to make you think that something bad's gonna happen, but then it doesn't. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm like, that's a little bit of like a cheap trick. You know what I mean? So yeah, I try not to fall for those things whenever I can, and fight against those things, which is not always possible.
Yeah, of course. And there's ways that everybody tells their story, and how either maybe it's creatives or people higher up asking for certain things to be done. I think it can be hard because if you're doing TV, unfortunately now people do like look at their phones during it because it's just such a natural habit. And as you said, you blink and you miss something. But then sometimes that's also, I don't think you'll look at your phone if the show's good, and you're always going to pay attention and you pick up on details and also subtext as well here with what's going on and how much you sort of want to pay attention to what is going on, because
Mm-hmm.
there is jargon that you may not understand until somebody explains it, or what the plan is for someone to do, especially when it comes to like finance stuff, because you could throw big words around to confuse people, but then actually it can be quite then simplified a lot more.
Yeah, totally, man. I mean, and the truth is that I think that this idea of again, I think when people get distracted, if you're watching something and then like suddenly you find yourself checking the time on your phone or just whatever, it's just because the show is not doing it for you. For me, the worst thing that happens to me is like if I'm very tired and I can't really like keep watching something, and I'll just like, "Oh, I can't watch this now. I'm too tired. I'm just kind of like falling asleep or something like that." But if I want to watch something, I want to commit to that, in a way. And Yeah, I like to think that there's like almost like fast food version of films and television, and there's like the gourmet stuff, and hopefully you get to make some gourmet stuff where people like can have some healthy stuff, like all natural and locally sourced. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and also at the same time, you can always go for a bit of fast food stuff every so often. Treat yourself.
For sure, you can. No, of course, man, of course. I No, look, it's hard because the problem I think is there's just too much. There's just too much stuff being made, and it's being made at a pace that is not sustainable, and there's things that are not, perhaps a little bit green. They're like a little bit, they're not ready to go out. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know. There's no need to make so much. There's already a lot of stuff out there. You don't need to make more. But I don't know. I don't understand how is it sustainable financially and everything, kind of like to produce so much stuff. And where like when the quality of things is not that good. If you told me that everything is great, I'll be like, sure, keep it coming. But the truth is like you're inundated with stuff that is like pretty bad, and there are some things that are you know good and great, but those are few. And yeah, and I think like the challenge as a sort of like somebody working in the industry is like look, I'm gonna pass on this offer. I'm not gonna do that job, and I'm gonna like try to keep doing the things that I believe in, kind of that are gonna, you know, be sort of rewarding in the end.
Yeah, exactly. And as I think sometimes as well, people may forget like it is an art, and like you're putting your a piece of yourself into your work as well. And also you want to better yourself and make sure that you can do bigger and better things, and things that you know that you're going to enjoy doing. So I think there's nothing worse than going to a job and sort of sitting in your car being like, okay, here's another day of like trying to
Hmm.
make sure that we can do, just to get through it, just to get through another day, and sort of see what happens with that. And yeah, again, especially when you want to work on, you want to work on stuff and have a lot of fun. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, but look, don't get me wrong. It's it's still a job, so it's not like you just have to have fun. But I think you really have to believe in what you're doing. It's a little bit like if you're in a relationship with someone that you kind of like, but you're not, crazy about, and like you're just there because you've been together for a long time, and you know what I mean. It's like, well, that's kind of like unfair to the other person, but also to yourself. So I think that if you think about it like that, it's like, what am I doing here? I mean, there's probably somebody else who would really connect with this material, who would be the right fit for it. And so yeah, it's just kind of like having, you need to be true to yourself. You need to be honest about the things. And of course, when I was starting, I did certain jobs thinking, oh, this is going to be a great experience, and I'm going to learn from it. I like the challenge, and I was naive in many ways and thought, oh well, this is going to be great. I'm going to be able to make something interesting, and then it sort of like doesn't turn out to be like that. But then again, that's part of the learning process. Like you're, again, when you're inexperienced and you're kind of hungry to experience stuff, you'll jump headfirst into pretty much anything, like, because everything is exciting and kind of seems like a great opportunity. But then, yeah, with a little bit of experience and a little bit more confidence, you're like, I'm not gonna do that. I can tell. You can read the signs, like much better, and your instinct and your intuition kind of like, yeah, it goes like, nope, don't do it, don't do it. It pays well, but don't do it, because no, because again, it's I think, yeah, you don't wanna, yeah, it's not about money. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
there are other ways where you could, this is not an easy industry anyway. It's like you spend a lot of time away from your family. You don't know what you're gonna do next. It's very unpredictable, etc., etc. And so I think you have to always, yeah, try to choose with your heart in a way, and with your taste, if that makes sense. It's like, is this something that I would watch? Is this something that I want to spend whatever 6 months of my life doing, and putting it out in the world, and
yeah. No, I totally get you, and I understand what you're saying as well, because there's just so much. I think there's maybe also thinking like there's so little time, and there's stuff that I would love to do that's going to be sort of meaningful and impactful as well, especially like visually as well, because as you said, when does subtext become text, and how can I sort of incorporate both of them, and then also have my visual flair to it as well, and bring alive to what we're making. I've got two more questions for you.
Mhm.
The first, my penultimate question is what's your favorite scene that you didn't shoot?
My favorite scene that I didn't shoot, you mean from industry?
Yes.
Probably, I think my favorite scenes that I didn't shoot. I mean, I think it's the Rishi episode. Episode 4 of season 3, when he goes gambling, and like, I mean, that episode is amazing. I mean, Michael Palliodimos, the DP who shot it, is a good friend of mine, and I told him, like, man, that episode is so good. I'm so jealous you get to shoot that one. I love that episode. I think that episode was brilliant, and he did beautiful work on it. But there are many. I mean, I wish I could have done some of the stuff with Sweet Pea, when they went to Accra. But yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, I've shot enough. I'm, it's a hard question.
Well, it's also your peers' work, right? And there's stuff that you're looking at differently. And as you said, there's that Rishi episode in season 3 where you're, as you said, like, oh, I'm jealous that you got to shoot that, because that felt kind of like a bit like an after hours, like the Scorsese film sort of episode of just pure chaos. But then also,
Exactly. Yeah.
which again, great film. If anyone hasn't seen it, go out and see it. And then also the Sweet Pea stuff, because you're away from the like trading part and you're kind of going to that more, what is it, the investigative side of things, and leaning into being sort of a stranger in a strange land because you're looking for something, and as audience members you're on that journey with her as well. So it's kind of, I can imagine it'd be quite fun doing those scenes, because you're like, oh, how can we make this a bit more visually interesting? Are they just sitting and waiting for this guy in the reception? But how can we maybe frame it in a way that like they're sitting by the entrance all the time waiting for him?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean for sure. And I guess is these are episodes that the Rishi episode and the Sweet Pea episode. They're almost like standalone. You know what I mean? They're their own thing. And it's like, for example, like season 4, I think episode 2. The whole like Henry kind of trip, Henry's birthday. I mean, I thought that episode was so much fun to shoot, and it was so interesting from a kind of style point of view, like the fact that he has this memory, and then his father shows up, and you don't know until the end that and stylistically kind of like how to do that in a way that sort of like doesn't give it away, but then at the same time it feels like, oh, like motivated. The flashback stuff, with Commander, with this jaguar under the tree, and little Henry sitting at the table, and big Henry, and all these things that there was a certain poetry to that kind of stuff that you don't really get to do a lot in a show like Industry. So that for me was a lot of fun, and I think in that sense, that's why I say, for example, the Rishi episode, they're character studies. They're episodes that are kind of like character driven. They're not plot driven in a way. It's more about the character, and kind of you're feeling this character a little bit more. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, suddenly that they're making these deals and the stock is dropping. No, no, no. It's none of that. It's not. This is like much more of a, we're going inwards and we're going backwards, and that's kind of like gonna like help you like push the story forward after, right? But those are the kind of episodes. I mean, I'm a sucker for kind of like sort of like character pieces, like whatever, like Taxi Driver, or these slices of life where you follow pretty much like one character. And I did after I did season 3 of Industry, I shot the first season of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and that show was amazing to shoot. Was obviously like very, very different, and a wholly different experience. We can talk about that some other time if you want, but there's my favorite episode on that season that I shot is episode 4, which is like exactly this. Is literally it's like a character study in a way. It's like, and yeah, that's what kind of like I connect with that, to be honest. You know what I mean? When I read a script, that's what pulls me in. Like it's the story, but the story is almost like the story is like the text, and I'm more interested in the subtext, which is like the inner kind of trappings and what's going on inside of the characters, and that's what I like.
And I think as well, those are the episodes where everybody sort of has a taste of a character, and then they get the full taste of them, right? Because they built the sort of cult status within the series, and they're sort of there. And then when you experience it, and it kind of feels like a video game a little bit, because you're following them in the decisions and what's going on, and it's quite volatile and unpredictable, and it's like the choices that people make. Yeah, it's just interesting to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, if you imagine, like, for example, like if you didn't have that episode, where you get to like dive into kids, characters past, and then I think that the payoff at the end, when he confronts Whitney in the plane and tells him like, I'm not gonna like take your passport, and I'm not gonna go and hide like you because you're a miserable peasant or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't think that would have been as powerful if you didn't get to know, and also like his relationship with Yasmin. Like, I mean, like that episode, it's so beautiful in the way it sets up Henry's progression, and the way you get to understand him afterwards, and of course it's a slow episode. It's a little bit like it breaks a little bit the rhythm and the shape of the show. And some people go like, oh, but that's not industry. Like, where's the trading? There's no more trading anymore. This is like this is whatever, the crown or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? And but it's not. It is the same world. It's just that I think really, really good shows do that a lot and do it really well. I mean, Sopranos, Mad Men, they all do it. They kind of like take this kind of like off ramp and go in a kind of like a little bit of a road trip and then come back to the, and it's beautiful when it's done well.
Yeah, 100%. And again, those are the episodes I think people always remember most and point out and point to,
That's
and
right.
even take inspiration from. Because I wouldn't be surprised if showrunners like, what's my Rishi episode? What's my Sweet Pea episode? How are we going to incorporate that in the season? I know we've got 8 episodes, but we need to make sure we get one of those tucked in. And we'll do it in the middle of the season so people are locked in, and no one can say anything, or produce
Yeah,
and whatnot.
yeah, totally, man. And yeah, I mean, look, I also think that it's so nice when you have an audience that already is invested and they like the show, and that then you can do these things where like you can be a little bit more provocative in a way, like kind of like just unpredictable. You know what I mean? Like those things that again, I think that when shows become too predictable or things are a little bit too mapped out, I mean, it's boring. I lose interest. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, again, it's like I want to do stuff that I would like to watch. You know what I mean? Um, Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. Just to wrap up this episode, what was your favorite
hmm
scene to shoot in season 4?
My favorite scene to shoot in season 4. Oh man, that's a very very tough question. Let me think for a minute. I think I'm not gonna give you a scene, but I think that whole sequence that happens in Paris in the hotel, with when they invite Harper and this right wing politician, it's basically like making this toast, and Yasmin is there, and I mean, there's something about that and the way we did it and the way it looks and the way that whole ending feels like that I thought it was quite successful in a way that I think it captured a kind of feeling that the show hadn't really done yet, you know? Kind of like now suddenly Harper is sitting next to these like, racist, whatever, Nazis, whatever, and then the following morning with Yasmin listening to them to the voice message from her dad, all that stuff for me was like, it was very nice, very powerful, and again, all very very organic. And a little bit of trivia is that hotel room in Paris is the same hotel room that we shot the Stern Tao office. We just changed things up a little bit and recycled the walls and
But that's the magic of filmmaking, like using the space
absolutely.
and showing, like, it could be Stern Tower, well, then actually we're from London, now we're in Paris. But I think what you've chosen as well, like the whole sequence of Harper going into basically the lion's den in a way of like,
hmm
this is what you kind of wanted, and now, well, I don't want to say kind of wanted, but this is what you're sort of maybe uncovering from what you're doing, and this the people that could be sort of you're dealing with and whatnot. it's also just it's masterfully edited, but it's also the choices of like focusing on people's faces and having their reactions, because it's for them, it's like what they're saying is like, for them, they think it's normal. They think it's okay because we're behind closed doors, we can say this, but actually it's just, yeah, it's messed up.
Yeah, no, and also look, I think it's an incredible sequence because, yeah, like you said, Harper's going to this sort of like lion's den. She's kind of unaware of what this is, right? And then once sort of like the penny drops and she realizes what Yasmin is up to and what she has become in a way, like, I mean that final moment where she's basically like, come with me, like, I mean, let's like, where she literally like extends her hand, and Yasmin chooses not to go with her, and basically like, this is who I am. This is this. It's sort of like, it's so heartbreaking. It's doubly heartbreaking because first you don't get to see Harper being like that a lot in the show, because Harper is a lot more like cutthroat, and she's usually the one doing things to others. And in this case, she's on the receiving end, but she's still kind of like thinking, I can save you. I can, I want to, I love you. You're my friend. And we've been through so much together. Come with me. Like, this is fucked up. What are you doing? And I say it's doubly painful because then you have Yasmin as well, who's like this very complicated character, with this very troubling past, who's kind of like, you can see her basically, she's repeating the cycle of abuse, and you're like, come on, just get out of there. What are you doing? What are you doing? And again, it, uh, again, that's beautifully written, I think, incredibly well acted. I think that, all the actors, man, this season, and we didn't really talk about them much, but like, needless to say, I think they're all incredible. Kid, Kid acting, Henry Mack, it's fascinating. It's amazing. I think Max was an incredible addition to the cast and the story. Like, and of course, Nyhala and Marissa, they're just incredible. So yeah, usually if you ask me about what's your favorite scene or something, I very rarely am gonna go from a visual point of view. It's more like this one resonates. There's a kind, it's about, I think it's about the, what's there in terms of like what's going on story wise and character wise and performance wise, and my work disappears. You know what I mean? I don't want to, it's hard for me to watch stuff that I've done, because then you're like thinking, oh, why did I do that, or what? But it's beautiful when that kind of like disappears and you become an audience member, and I think that scene did that to me.
And I get what you mean in terms of like the picking his favorite scene, because you're maybe in your mind, you like, maybe like the question is like, what's the favorite scene, like technically or whatnot, and how you would have done it. But it's like actually what could have been the best scene of like capturing those moments and seeing how it all progresses, and especially in that scene where you're just like, well, this is taking a really, really, like 180 here.
Mhm.
Get out of here. Fedi, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much, Robert. It was a pleasure.
Industry season 4 is streaming now in the UK and BBC iPlayer. In the US on HBO Max. Go out and watch Fedi and his team's amazing work. Thank you again.
Thanks, Robert.
You take care, and bye-bye now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.